and I hope we have enough space. So, the recap that we're going to do, like I said last week, it's going to be much shorter. I don't see any reason on why we're going to go all the way through the first book of Kings. It was just at this point we've done it like 4 times. But if we look at, and it's not rotating. Come on. There we go. So I originally we started with this particular genealogy graph where we see where it says Saul, David, Solomon, Rehoboam, etc., etc. And we see this transition, but the barrier was is that it didn't really tell us about who was the good king or bad king, and even though it said which tribe they were representing or which section of either the northern or southern, there were some gaps. So I found this one online, and this showed us essentially this time period that we went through, which was Elijah. We've already talked about Ahijah, Jehu, Micah. Well, we didn't talk about Micah, but Micah was during this time period. And we covered Elijah. We know that he ascended up into heaven. He never passed away. And we know that he imparted onto Elisha, his protege, a double blessing because that's what he requested and so on and so forth. And we will, I believe, I'm not sure how far ahead I got, but I think we'll talk about the death of Elisha today. It could be next week. I'm sorry. I did get a little ahead of myself. But this is the time period that we're talking about with Ahaziah, Joram, and Jehu. And you'll notice that we also have Jehoshaphat, Jehoram over here, and Ahaziah. So even though the names are the same, they're not the same person. That was one thing that I did learn at this time too. And that in this particular section, it becomes quite challenging because there are names that overlap. And there was something that I'm not going to bring it up because I'll bring it up when I see it here. But I think this is where we left off was in chapter 8, right, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start here. Where's the baby at? I heard him yelling right now. Okay. So, chapter 8. Then Elisha spoke unto the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, Arise and go thou and thine household and sojourn wherever thou canst sojourn, for the Lord hath called for a famine. And it shall also come upon the land 7 years. And the woman arose and did after the saying of the man of God. Do you hear that? Something is someone in the laundry room? Landon, is that you? What's that? It sounds like something electrical is burning. Oh, it just stopped. What was that? Oh, maybe it's the dryer. Sorry, guys. It sounded bad. Okay. I didn't want to have to record a fire here. So, just a quick recap. If you guys remember, there was a woman who was promised by Elisha that she would bear a son, even though she said she didn't need a son. She was just happy. And she got a son, and then this kid fell ill, said he had a massive headache, and he fell ill in the fields. She found him and said, Did I not tell you that I was content, so to speak? And Elisha went and healed this child. So that's where we're at now. The kid's been restored. Elisha is warning them of this famine that's going to happen and telling her to go find a place to stay. So the women arise and did after the saying of the man of God, and she went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines 7 years. And it came to pass at the 7 years' end that the woman returned out of the land of the Philistines, and she went forth to cry unto the king for her house and for her land. And the king talked with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God. So just a quick recollection here. Gehazi was the right-hand man to Elijah, or Elisha, if you guys remember. Okay? So this is something that's very unique. This is providence, right? It's not accidental. I think that's why it's recorded, to be honest with you. But it says, Tell me, I pray thee, of the great things that Elisha has done. So, coincidentally, the king is talking to the servant of Elisha, and he's asking him of the great things that he's done. And it came to pass, as he was telling the king how he had restored a dead body to life, that behold, the woman, whose son he had restored to life, cried to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life. And when the king asked the woman, she told him. So the king appointed unto her a certain officer, saying, Restore all that was hers, and all the fruits of the field since the day that she left the land, even until now. So how cool is that? Again, we don't call things coincidence when we talk about the Bible. It's obvious that God had a plan from the get-go, and it's just cool when we're the third party reading the story, where when we get to see the providence taking place. The king's talking to the prophet's right-hand man, saying, you know what, tell me about all the great things he did. I would say, if we were to talk about the miracles that were done by Elijah, one of the greatest miracles would be restoring the person's son back to life. Remember? Elijah also had something similar like that. How many people do you know are raising people from the dead nowadays? I work in the hospital. When we have all the tools where someone just barely dies and we still can't bring them back. And we have all kinds of drugs to try and restart the heart, so on and so forth. Okay? Now, when you have someone who's been dead several days and rigor mortis is setting in, and they speak life into them in the name of God, it's a miracle. We're calling it a miracle. That's the miracle that Gehazi is telling the king about. And coincidentally, the woman is coming in after 7 years of being outside of the land to try and avoid the famine. She walks in at the same time he's talking about it. So how cool is that? Providence. Continuing on. And Elisha came to Damascus, and Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, was sick. And it was told him, saying, The man of God is come hither. And the king said unto Hazael, Take a present in thine hand, and go and meet the man of God, and inquire of the Lord by him, saying, Shall I recover from this disease? Okay, so I'm going to stop there. This is one of the things that I wanted to talk about. Many times in these sections of 2 Kings, we see these names repeat themselves. Now, if you recall, I believe this is like the third time we've heard of Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, and Ben-Hadad's already been dead twice. Okay? How can that be? We see this instance again. So, I have some notes here. I believe this is from Blue Letter Bible. If it's not, I apologize to whoever I stole this from and not giving you credit for it. But it says, Ben-Hadad seems to have been the title of the reigning king of Aram, or Syria, because Ben-Hadad literally means son of Hadad. Hadad, or Adad, was the god of storm and thunder. And as was common in the epoch of history, kings were seen as sons of the primary god of the region. In the Bible, Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, is mentioned in 1 Kings 15, throughout 1 Kings 20, 2 Kings 6, 8, 13, and 2 Chronicles 16, and two more places, Jeremiah 49 and Amos 1. Since Ben-Hadad is a title, much like Pharaoh or president, the term can refer to different individuals at different times. The context of each passage must be studied to determine who is involved. More students, slide this out of the way, sorry. More students of history accept the existence of three Ben-Hadads who ruled in Damascus. Ben-Hadad the first, who ruled circa 900 to 860 BC, his grandson, Ben-Hadad II, who ruled in 860 to 841, and another unrelated Ben-Hadad, the son of the man who assassinates Ben-Hadad II, which we'll read about today. So, in case you were wondering, why do we keep seeing Ben-Hadad if he's already died? This is the explanation as to why. Because I thought the same thing. Oh, I don't understand. Why does he keep popping up? So
it's like Herod.
Yes.
Wait,
what did you like? Oh, Herod. Yeah, Herod
the Great, Herod Tetrarch, and Herod the brother, the son. It's like the genealogy of those Herods.
Yeah, I would say in addition to that, something like the Caesar.
Yeah.
You know, you have Caesar, Caesar Augustus, Caesar of whatever, you know what I mean? Oh, if I it'd be I mean it would be a better analogy if I had more Caesars to say, but my bad. Okay. So, moving on to Ben-Hadad. So Hazael went to meet him and took a present with him, even of every good thing of Damascus, 40 camels burden, and came and stood before him and said, Thy son Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, hath sent me to thee, saying, Shall I recover of this disease? And Elisha said unto him, Go and say unto him, Thou mayest certainly recover. Howbeit, the Lord had showed me that he shall surely die. And he settled his countenance steadfastly until he was ashamed. And the man of God wept. And Hazael said, Why weepeth my Lord? And he answered, Because I know the evil that thou wilt do to the children of Israel. To their strongholds thou wilt set on fire, and their young men wilt thou slay with the sword, and wilt dash their children, and rip up their women with child. And Hazael said, But what? Is thy servant a dog, that he should do this great thing? And Elijah answered, The Lord hath showed me that thou shalt be king over Syria. So he departed from Elisha and came to his master, who said to him, What said Elisha to thee? And he answered, He told me that thou should surely recover. And it came to pass on the morrow that he took a thick cloth and dipped it in water and spread it on his face so that he died. And Hazael reigned in his steadfast. Okay, so just a quick recap. Ben-Hadad II has fallen ill. He sees that the prophet's nearby, the prophet of the true living God, right? And he wants to send him with everything nice that he has. I think it's like he's almost like he's trying to stack the blessing in his favor. 40 camels loaded down with the best of what Damascus has. And when Hazael, which is the right-hand man to the king, gets there, Elijah says, no, he's absolutely going to be well. But in that moment, God reveals to him everything that's going to happen, like a vision. And he starts weeping bitterly. And you imagine being Hazael in that moment, just staring there and the prophet staring at him, weeping. And he confesses to him what God has revealed to him. And sure enough, it happens on the next day. So he didn't die from the sickness, but he died by his right-hand man with a wet towel over his face. He suffocated him to death. So let's get to the next one. Nice guy, huh?
Yeah.
Like a prince.
And in the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, being then king of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, began to reign. 32 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem, and he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as did the house of Ahab, for the daughter of Ahab was his wife. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, yet the Lord would not destroy Judah for David his servant's sake, as he promised him to give him alway a light, and to his children. In his days, Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah, and made a king over themselves. So Joram went over to Zaar, and all the chariots with him, and he arose by night and smote the Edomites, which compassed him about. And the captains of the chariots and the people fled into their tents, and Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah unto this day. Then Libnah revolted at the same time, and the rest of the acts of Joram and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Joram slept with his fathers, and he was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and Ahaziah the son reigned in his stead. So, okay, I'm just reading. My note that I have is actually from a different slide. So, we see lots of changes of hands here, right? And it shows, this one does a good job about it. It shows Joram here of Israel, evil king, 851. And that brings us into Jehoram, who was of the son of Jehoshaphat, also an evil king during the same time period. So we see this contrast between Judah and Israel. Now, If we continue on, this says in the 12th year of Joram. So if we go back to this list, we can see this is the 12th year of Joram. This is an evil king during this. This is during the time period of Elisha. Okay. Of the son of Ahab, king of Israel, did Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, begin to reign. So let's go back to that page. We see Jehoram reigning during that time. Okay. 22 years old was Ahaziah when he began to reign, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri, king of Israel. And he walked in the way of the house of Ahab and did evil in the sight of the Lord, as did the house of Ahab, for he was the son-in-law of the house of Ahab. And he went with Joram, the son of Ahab, to war against Hazael, king of Syria, in Ramoth Gilead. And the Syrians wounded Joram, and King Joram went back to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Syrians had given him in Ramah, when he fought against Hazael, king of Syria. And Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Joram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel, because he was sick. Okay, so we see the two kings gathering together here in this land. So now what's going to happen? This is interesting. And Elisha the prophet called one of the children of the prophets and said unto him, Gird up thy loins and take this box of oil in thy hand and go to Ramoth Gilead. And when thou comest nither, look out there, Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, and go in, and make him arise up from among all his brethren, and carry him to an inner chamber. Then take the box of oil and pour it on his head, and say, Thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. Then open the door and flee and tarry not. So the young man, even the young man the prophet, went to Ramoth Gilead. And when he came, behold, the captains of the host were sitting, and he said, I have an errand of thee, O captain. And Jehu said, Unto which of us all? And he said, To thee, captain. And he arose and he went into the house. And he poured the oil on his head and said unto him, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I have anointed thee king over the people of the Lord, even over Israel. And thou shalt smite the house of Ahab thy master, that I may avenge the blood of my servants, the prophets, and of the blood of all the servants of the Lord at the hand of Jezebel. For the whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab him that pisseth against the wall, and him that is shut up and left in Israel, and I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha, the son of Ahijah. And the dog shall eat Jezebel in the portion of Jezreel, and there shall be none to bury her. And he opened the door and fled. Then Jehu came forth to the servants of his Lord, and one said unto him, Is all well? Wherefore came this mad fellow to thee? And he said to them, You know this man and his communication. And they said, It is false. Tell us now. And he said, Thus and thus he spake to me, saying, Thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. Then they hasted, and took every man his garment and put it under the top of the stairs and blew with trumpets, saying, Jehu is king. So great. This is crazy, okay? Going back several chapters, utter destruction was coming to Ahab and his whole house. There was going to be punishment against him and Jezebel for everything that she did against the prophets in the house of the Lord. And he repented in sackcloth and ashes. And if you recall, God withheld the judgment on Ahab directly, but said it would be essentially the punishment would come on his bloodline. And I think it was the second generation, which, well, we'll read, I believe this is the second generation coming up now. And they're going to be punished for these things. And what's interesting to note here is that I believe it was the prophet Elijah said these things, not the prophet Elisha. So these were things that Elijah had said, right? Because Elijah was the one who fought the prophets of Jezebel with fire and tested the prophets of Baal, if you guys remember. But he comes out of this meeting and they're probably looking at him and he's got oil all over his head, They're like, what happened in there? And he's like, oh, nothing. This guy's a crazy man. And this madman came in here and they're like, no, you're a liar. What did he say? And when they hear that he's king, that he's been anointed king, Lawson James, no. They're super excited. They immediately accept him as king. They throw their garments down. You see that as a sign of submission. There is a term that I haven't heard before, but it does appear elsewhere in scripture, and that is pisseth against the wall. And so I wanted to figure out what that meant. And it says pisseth against the wall was an idiomatic expression used in ancient Israel. It refers to males who are the only ones who can urinate against walls. When someone in the Bible refers to someone else as pissing against a wall, it's understood that the person urinating is a male and not a female. Some interpreters detect an added nuance in the phrase. It's possible that the main reference is to dogs, since male dogs often urinate on vertical surfaces. The application of the phrase to men would then carry the idea that the men in question were ignoble individuals of low character, saying, I shall discomfit all the pissets against a wall would translate, I'm going to utterly defeat every male down to the last low-life loser, dirtbag. So that's what's meant by that. So we just talked about this is now Jehu becoming king, but this Jehu is anointed king at this time. But I would say the best way to understand this is let's call it 841. He's anointed king in 841, but Joram, the son of Ahab, is still king, right? Because he still had that guy is still licking his wounds, so to speak, from the kings of Syria that beat him down. So let's see what happens. And if you look at this, actually, we see Ahab, and then we see Ahaziah is his son, and Joram is, that would almost be, I could almost see the second generation there, but those years are so close to each other, 853 to 852 there. That's very tight, but I don't know enough to speak on that. So let's see what happens here. This is, I don't know if you notice, I bolded a statement here. I think it's funny. It's one of my favorites, but it says, so Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Now Joram had kept Ramoth Gilead, he and all Israel, because of Hazael, king of Syria. But King Joram was returned to be healed in Jezreel of all the wounds which the Syrians had given him when he fought with Hazael, king of Syria. And Jehu said, if it be your minds, then let none go forth nor escape out of the city to go tell it in Jezreel. So Jehu rode in a chariot and went to Jezreel, for Joram lay there. And Ahaziah, king of Judah, was come down to see Joram. And there stood a watchman on the tower in Jezreel, and he spied the company of Jehu as he came, and said, I see a company. And Joram said, take a horseman and send to meet them, and let him say, is it peace? So there went one on horseback to meet him, and said, thus saith the king, is it peace? And Jehu said, what hast thou to do with peace? Turn thee behind me. And the watchman told, saying, the messenger came to them, but he cometh not again. Then he sent out a second on horseback, which came to them, and said, thus saith the king, is it peace? And Jehu answered, what hast thou to do with peace? Turn thee behind me. And the watchman told, saying, he came even unto them. Come here. Come here. I'll hold you. Get over here. Come here. Come here. I know. You can't have candy. Okay. So now we're on the second. So then he sent out a second on horseback, which came to them and said, Thus saith the king, is it peace? And Jehu answered, What hast thou to do with peace? Turn again behind me. So they don't know. We got the king of Judah and the king of Israel at the same place, the same location. They've got a watchtower way up in the air, right? And they're sending horsemen out to meet this company to find out what's going on. Are they coming to attack us or what's happening? So now that watchtower guy says, we see that the last guy went and he cometh not again. And the driving is like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he driveth furiously. And I really like that verse just because it's they have no idea who he is, but they see that he's driving like a crazy man. Maybe his chariot's on one wheel coming around a turn, you know what I mean? Or he's speeding. They could just tell that he must have driven his chariot like a wild man. So we see now Joram's going to respond. And Joram said, Make ready. And his chariot was made ready. And Joram, king of Israel, and Azahiah, king of Judah, went out, each in his chariot. And they went out against Jehu and met him in the portion of Naboth, and of portion of Naboth the Jezreelite. I got to make a mental note there because I think Naboth, the portion of land, wasn't that the guy who they killed so that they could grow vegetables? I could be mistaken.
Next to the palace?
Yeah, wasn't that his name, Naboth?
I don't remember.
I could be mistaken. But that's something that I'll look back into. I'm very interested about that. That name looked really familiar. I could be wrong though. And it came to pass when Joram, and who's Joram the king of?
What's that?
Who is Joram?
Judah?
Yeah, no. So
Israel.
Joram is the king of Israel. So we see that, remember, they're coming after. Actually, I think that's what they're coming after. They were specifically coming after Joram because that's the son of Ahab, right? Okay, let's just keep reading. I don't want to stop anymore. And it came to pass when Joram saw Jehu that he said, Is it peace, Jehu? And he answered, What peace? So long as the whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many. And Joram turned his hands and fled and said to Ahaziah, which Ahaziah being the king of Judah, There is treachery, O Ahaziah. And Jehu drew a bow with his full strength and smote Jehoram between his arms, and the arrow went out at his heart, and he sunk down in his chariot. Then Jehu said to Bidkar, his captain, Take up and cast him in the portion of the field of Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember how that, when they rode together after Ahab his father, the Lord laid this burden upon him. Surely I have seen yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, saith the Lord, and I will requite thee in this plat, says the Lord. Now therefore take and cast him into the plat of ground, according to the word of the Lord. So maybe that is what it is, Miguel.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I think it is, yeah. Okay. And Jehu followed. Oh, I'm sorry. I moved on. But when Ahaziah, the king of Judah, saw this, he fled by way of the garden house. And Jehu followed after him and said, Smite him also in the chariot. And they did so at the going up to Gur, which is by Ibleam. Or Ibleam. Ibleam. I don't know. And he fled to Megiddo and died there. And his servants carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem and buried him in his sepulchre with his fathers in the city of David. And in the 11th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, began Ahaziah to reign over Jerusalem. One of the things that jumped out to me in this particular section was that the battle took place in the valley of Megiddo. Do you guys remember where the valley of Megiddo is?
In Revelation, the last battle.
Yes. Miguel, that's what I'm talking about. So Revelation 16 talks about the 7 bowls of God's wrath. And if we look down we see this is where basically man is challenging God. And if we go to verse 12, it says, Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and it was dried up, so that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are spirits of demons performing signs, which go out to the kings of the earth and the whole world to gather them to battle of that great day of God Almighty. Then we see Jesus here. Behold, I am coming as a thief. Blessed is he who watches and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And they gathered them together to the place that is called in Hebrew Armageddon. This word that we see here, the battle Megiddo, is actually Har Megiddo, and over the course of time, the word Har, H gets dropped, and Megiddo becomes on, and we get the word Armageddon. And we've had many movies. Hollywood has taken over with that. People know that. I mean, when you hear the word Armageddon, what do you think, babe?
War.
End of the world. Good job. So Michelle was correct on that. But yes, good observation, Miguel. I'm telling you, I'm ready for you to take over, sir. I think you got that. No, I'm kidding.
No, hey, I'm learning because we already read Revelation, and it came to my mind.
Yeah, it's just a unique word. Okay, so chapter 9. And when Jehu was come to Jezreel, you guys remember who lived in Jezreel?
Jezebel.
Yes. Good job. So, when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tired her head and looked out at a window. And as Jehu entered in at the gate, she said, Had Zimri peace, who slew his master? So I listened to a pastor explain what this meant, okay? And it's basically referring to another instance that we've already talked about where Zimri killed his master and reigned in his place. And it's almost like she's adorning herself to try and be maybe his wife. I don't know. She paints her face. I mean, I still make that comment to Michelle when she puts her makeup on. She's painting her face, kind of a deal, as a joke. But we see that she's like adorning her hair and those things. So it almost looks like she's getting ready to try and entice him. Okay. And this is interesting. And he lifted up his face to the window and said, Who is on my side? Who? And there looked out of him 2 or 3 eunuchs. Do you guys remember what a eunuch was?
Unit.
Servant,
Say it again.
a servant,
What was unique about that type of servant?
that they were incapable of having family, put it that way,
Yeah, they were castrated.
castrated.
So it would be like the king's wife. The king would have servants that were, set up to take watch of their wives and their women servants, and they were incapable of soiling them, so to speak. So they removed that ability. So we see here. I mean, I just was thinking about this is like you have this guy who's taken over as the king. He's killed the other kings and he's saying, Hey, is there anyone for me? I'd be kind of looking at this woman who was part of the reason why they chopped everything off of me. You know what I mean? And they bring their heads out of the window real quick that they're for Jehu. So he says, and there looked out to him 2 or 3 eunuchs, and he said, Throw her down. So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall. So she was high enough in the air that when she landed on the wall, the vessels ruptured and blasted blood splatter on the side of the wall. And what's worse, it says, as her blood sprinkled on the wall, and the horses and he trode her underfoot. And when all had come in, he did eat and drink. So she gets cast down to the ground, probably at the entrance, right? So there's a tall window, like maybe a watchtower. She's looking at him, all painted, ready to go. They throw her out from the top. It's a big enough fall for when she lands on the ground, her blood spatter splays all over the wall. And the companies that's with him drives over the top of her body with the horses and chariots. Okay? So they smash her good. And So what does he do? He comes into Jezreel and he eats. And he's hungry and thirsty. So he finished eating and drinking, and he says, "Go see now this cursed woman and bury her, for she is a king's daughter." So he makes the decree to go bury her because she is a king's daughter, right? And that was the respectful thing to do, but that's not fulfilling scripture. So what happens? And when they went to bury her, but they found no more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. Wherefore they came again and told him. And he said, "This is the word of the Lord, which was spoken by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, In the portion of Jezreel shall dogs eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the carcass of Jezebel shall be as dung upon the face of the field in the portion of Jezreel, so that they shall not say, This is Jezebel." So what Jehu is saying is like, this is a fulfillment of prophecy because they went out to go bury her, and basically she's going to be buried because she's now dog shit. Oh, I'm sorry, dog poop, right? The dogs have eaten all of her, and she's going to go, they're going to go poop out in the field, and that's what's left of her. That was the punishment for her, and it was a fulfillment of the prophecy. Excuse my language. I definitely don't like to curse during Bible study, or ever for that matter, right? Lawson, it's not funny. Okay, so chapter 10. Chapter 10. And Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. And Jehu wrote letters and sent to Samaria unto the rulers of Jezreel, to the elders, and to them that brought up Ahab's children, saying, Now as soon as this letter comes to you, seeing your master's sons are with you, and there are with you chariots and horses, a fenced city also, and armor, look even out the best and meetest of your master's son, and set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house. Okay, so think about what Jehu says. You know what? I'll give you guys an opportunity. I'm coming after you. I know that he has 70 sons. You got a nice fortified city. You got armor. You got the best horses. Load them all up. We'll go man versus man out the field. And he's sending this to the leaders of the town. So the leaders are responding, but they were exceedingly afraid and said, Behold, two kings stood not before him. How shall then we stand? And he that was over the house, and he that was over the city, the elders also, and the bringers up of the children sent to Jehu, saying, We are thy servants, and will do all that thou shalt bid us. We will not make any king. Do thou that which is good in thine eyes. So what we have here is the people are responding. The people who cared for these people and grew them up as children are saying, look, there's no way that we can defeat this guy if he's already wiped out two kings, the king of Judah and the king of Israel. Okay? How can it be? So they write him and say, hey, we'll be your servants. You tell us what you want to do, we'll do it. So he writes back to them, If you be mine, and you will hearken to my voice, take ye the heads of the men of your master's sons, and come to me to Jezreel by tomorrow this time. Now the king's sons, being 70 persons, were with the great men of the city which brought them up. And it came to pass when the letter came to them that they took the king's sons and slew 70 persons, and put their heads in baskets, and sent them to Jezreel. And there came a messenger and told him, saying, They have brought the heads of the king's sons. And he said, Lay ye them into 2 heaps at the entering in of the gate until morning. And it came to pass in the morning that he went out and stood and said to all the people, You be righteous. Behold, I conspired against my master and slew him. But who slew all these? Now know that there shall fall unto the earth nothing of the word of the Lord, which the Lord spake concerning the house of Ahab, for the Lord has done that which he hath spoken by his servant Elijah. So this is where it gets, I have a hard time understanding this, but I'm just going to read it as it is, and I kind of give you my 2 cents. So Jehu slew all that remained of the house of Ahab and Jezreel, and all his great men, and his kinfolks, and his priests, until he left him none remaining. And he arose and departed and came to Samaria. And as he was at the shearing house in the way, Jehu met with the brethren of Ahaziah, king of Judah. So, before we get to that part, the latter part here that I have bolded, and to his great men, his kinfolks, and his priests, this verse could be a recollection of the things that have already transpired. I mean, it does look that's the way that it's recorded. But for some reason, to me, it's reading as though after those people slew the heads of those 70 sons, that he went ahead and wiped out all of the people that were there, his kinfolks, his priests, until there was none remaining, including all his great men. I'm not sure if that includes the men who slew the 70 sons, but maybe it does. I don't know that matters. At the end of the day, what matters is that God said he was going to wipe out every single person inside his household, his sons and everything, and Jehu is now the utensil that's doing it. So, Jehu's now leaving, and he comes across the brothers of the other king, Ahaziah, king of Judah, and he asks them, "Who are you?" And they answered, "We are the brethren of Ahaziah, and we go down to salute the children of the king and the children of the queen." So, where are they going to hang out? Do you guys see what's happening here?
Yeah,
It sounds to me like they're going to hang out with those 70 kids, right? Or 70 offspring. I don't know if they were kids. I'm assuming that they were younger, but it says Jehu met with the brethren of Ahaziah, the king of Judah, and said, "Who are you?" Or who are ye? And they answered, "We are the brethren of Ahaziah, and we go down to salute the children of the king and the children of the queen." I'm assuming that that's speaking to obviously the sons of Ahab and Jezebel were still alive. And he said, "Take them alive." And they took them alive and slew them at the pit of the shearing house, even 42 men, so 42 of them. Neither left he any of them. And when he was departed thence, he lighted on Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him. And he saluted him and said to him, "Is thine heart right, as my heart is with thy heart?" And Jehonadab answered, "It is." Okay? And okay, I didn't include it, but I'll talk about it for a second. "If it be, give me thine hand." And he gave him his hand, and he took him up into his chariot, and he said, "Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord." So they made him ride in his chariot. And when he came to Samaria, he slew all that remained unto Ahab in Samaria till he destroyed him, according to the saying of the Lord, which he spoke by Elijah. We will read about Jehonadab elsewhere, and we already have read about him in that his descendants, some 174 years later, are referenced to in the fact that they chose not to drink no strong drink or this or that or that. They had these laws that they abided to, as children abided to everything that their father said, and their reference for that. But it's almost as these men are basically, cleaning God's house. They're wiping out all of the idolatry and things of that sort. And he's asking him if his heart's right, and it is. So here's a really weird. It's weird. I'm puzzled by things like this sometimes, where is it permissible to lie and to do things that are in God's will then after the fact? You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm saying that the right way, but let's just read the story. "Then Jehu gathered all the people together and said, Ahab served Baal a little, and Jehu will serve him much. Now therefore, call to me all the prophets of Baal, all his servants and all his priests. Let not one be missing, for I have a great sacrifice for Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live." But Jehu acted deceptively, with the intent of destroying the worshippers of Baal. And Jehu said, "Proclaim a solemn assembly for Baal." So they proclaimed it. Then Jehu sent throughout all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came, so that there was not a man left who did not come. So they came into the temple of Baal, and the temple of Baal was full from one end to the other. And he said to the one in charge of the wardrobe, "Bring out vestments for all the worshippers of Baal." So he brought out vestments for them. Then Jehu and Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, went out into the temple of Baal and said to the worshippers of Baal, "Search and see that no servant of the Lord are here with you, but only the worshippers of Baal." So they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had appointed for himself 80 men on the outside and had said, "If any of the men whom I have brought into your hand escapes, whoever lets him escape, it shall be his life for the life of the other." Now it happened, as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, that Jehu said to the guard and the captains, "Go and kill them. Let none come out." And they killed them with the edge of the sword. Then the guards of the officers threw them out and went into the inner room of the temple of Baal, and they brought the sacred pillar out of the temple of Baal and burned them. And they broke down the sacred pillar of Baal and tore down the temple of Baal and made it a refuse dump to this day. So, what's that? Oh, so let's go on to the next slide. Now, thus Jehu destroyed Baal out of Israel. Howbeit, from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, Jehu departed not from after them. To wit, the golden calves that were in Bethel and that were in Dan. And the Lord said unto Jehu, "Because thou hast done well in executing that which was right in mine eyes, and hast done unto the house of Ahab according to all that was in mine heart, thy children of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel." But Jehu took no heed to walk in the law of the Lord, God of Israel, with all his heart, for he departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, which made Israel to sin. And in those days the Lord began to cut Israel short, and Hazael smote them in all the coasts of Israel, from Jordan eastward, all of the land of Gilead, the Gadites and the Reubenites, and the Manassites, from Aror, which is in the river Arnon, even Gilead and Bashan. Now the rest of the acts of Jehu, and all that he did, and all his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehu slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. And Jehoahaz, his son, reigned in his stead. And the time that Jehu reigned over Israel and Samaria was 28 years. So we see Jehu, which is Jehu's son, which is called Jehoahaz, which I believe is, they also refer to him as Joash. I don't know why, but I think his name is Jehoahaz and Joash, which is also the king during that time period of Judah. So it's going to get, the names are going to get a little bit more confusing when we thought they wouldn't get any more confusing. So chapter 11. And when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the seed royal. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's house, which were slain, and hid him, even him and his nurse, in the bedchamber from Athaliah, so that he was not slain. And he was with her hid in the house of the Lord 6 years. And Athaliah did reign over the land. And the 7th year of Jehoiada, Jehoiada sent and fetched the rulers over hundreds with the captains of the guard, and brought them to him in the house of the Lord, and made a covenant with them, and took an oath of them in the house of the Lord, and showed them the king's son. And he commanded them, saying, "This is the thing that you shall do. A third part of you shall enter in on the Sabbath, shall even be keepers of the watch of the king's house. And a third part shall be at the gate of Sur, and a third part at the gate behind the guard. So shall ye keep the watch of the house, that it be not broken down. And 2 parts of all you that go forth on the Sabbath, even they shall keep watch of the house of the Lord of the king. And you shall come compass the king round about, every man with his weapons in his hand. And he that cometh with the ranges, let him be slain, and be ye with the king as he goeth out, and as he cometh in. And the captains over the hundreds did according to all the things that Jehoiada the priest commanded. And they took every man his men that were come to the Sabbath, and with them that they should go out on the Sabbath. And they came to Jehoiada the priest, and the captains over the hundreds did the priest give King David's spears and shields that were in the temple of the Lord. And the guard stood, every man with his weapons in his hand, round about the king, from right corner of the temple to the left corner of the temple, along by the altar and the temple. And he brought forth the king's son, and put the crown upon him, and gave him the testimony. And they made him king and anointed him. And they clapped their hands and said, God save the king. And when Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of the people, she came to the people into the temple of the Lord. And when she looked, behold, the king stood by a pillar, as the manner was, and the princes and the trumpeters by the king, and all the people of the land rejoiced and blew the trumpets. And Athaliah rent her clothes and cried, Treason, treason. But Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains of the hundreds and the officers of the host, and said unto them, Have her forth with the ranges, and him that followeth her kill with the sword. For the priest had said, Let her not be slain in the house of the Lord. And they laid hands on her, and she went by the way by which the horses came in the king's house, and there she was slain. And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people, between the king also and the people. And the people of the land went into the house of Baal and broke it down. His altars and his images brake they in pieces thoroughly. And they slew Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priest appointed officers over the house of the Lord. And he took the rulers of hundreds and the captains of the guard and all the people of the land. And they brought down the king from the house of the Lord, and came by the way of the gate of the guard to the king's house. And he said, oh. Yeah, it's gross, dude. I don't want that diaper. Ooh. Ooh, and the poof. And he took the rulers of hundreds and the captains of the guard and all the people of the land, and they brought down the king from the house of the Lord, and came by the way of the gate of the guard to the king's house. And he sat on the throne of the kings, and all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet. And they slew Athaliah with the sword besides the king's house. So now we're talking about Jehoash, who's only 7 years old, and that's when he's given the kingdom. So we have Jehoash, 7 years old, this young age, ruling, I want to say Judah. And now we see the 7th year, Jehu. In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash began to reign. 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zibnah and of Beersheba. And Jehoash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all his days, wherein Jehoiada the priest instructed him. But the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burnt incenses in the high places. Okay, so that's not... I got those two mixed up. So I have this here because I noticed that the recollection of, on the other slide, that Jehoash was a bad king, when in fact he wasn't a bad king. He started out good. It says, and Jehoash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all the days wherein Jehoiada was the priest. We're going to learn later that when Jehoiada dies, that his instruction falls away. What's that, Miguel?
Yeah, when the priest died, I think I remember that he started to do bad things.
Right. And so let's talk about these high places. You guys remember the two high places that were given? One was in Dan, and gosh, I want to say I thought it was from Dan and Beersheba, but I could be mistaken. But they did this as a way to not have to go into the temple, so that they didn't have to compete with the other southern portion of Israel. But it says that he reigned in Jerusalem. I remember the temple being in Jerusalem. Yeah, it is in Jerusalem. So what's weird is that I don't know why he didn't take the temple, the high places away. But I have some notes here from the Blue Letter Bible. It says the high places were not taken away. This indicates that Jehoash implemented a halfway reformation and not a total reforming of Israel's worship. He did not take on the more difficult job of removing the high places. The people were so fondly and strangely addicted to the high places that the foregoing kings, though men of riper years and great power and courage, and finally settled in their thrones, could not take them away, and therefore it is not strange of Jehoiada if Jehoiada could not remove them. Okay, so I have a reference here to Christmas, right? We all know the significance of what Christmas is, right? We know that it has everything to do with Christ's birthday. Whether we disagree on the exact date or whatever it may be, we know that it's about Jesus. And I could easily say that Santa is an idol. And yet we have nostalgia around Christmas with Santa. How hard is it to remove him from all of our households when it comes around Christmas time? I mean, the whole premise behind Christmas has become Christmas spirit, right? You got to have your Christmas spirit. Ho, ho, ho. You got to have Santa. There's every kind of different Santa movie that's out there. You got to make your list because this guy's watching you. He's checking to see if you've been evil or nice, so on and so forth. And it's removing the emphasis on what Christmas is about, and that's Christ. And so it's very hard to break that nostalgia effect. How many of our houses have a Santa in it right now? I'm being serious. Like that's the reality of the situation. In the same way that they didn't take this away, that's the way that that's the best analogy that I could provide in the same scenario. And unfortunately, we did not go into chapter 13, which is where I had us slated to end. It's 6:00 now. But I want you guys to go ahead and read chapter 12. Okay? And chapter 12, there's just a little bit left. I'm just going to read it anyways. It's very short. And Jehoash said to the priests, all the money of the dedicated things that is brought into the house of the Lord, even the money of every one that passeth the account, the money that every man has set is, and all the money that cometh into any man's heart to bring into the house of the Lord, let the priests take it to them, every man of his acquaintance, and let them repair the breaches of the house. Okay. We're going to cover this next week. Essentially, what this king is doing is he sees that the temple's been damaged by various kings. Nobody's taking it serious. Everyone's doing Baal worship. It's been neglected. He wants to make sure that there's money set aside to rebuild or repair the house of the Lord. And we'll cover that chapter 12 next week. So what I want you to do is read chapter 12 through 19. I know that's a big stretch, but 12 is very short. 13 isn't very long either. But read 14 through 19, and you'll note that is due 12:26. Okay? The reason why I have 12:26 on there is because, and I'm going to do this.